Friends, this is a night of truth. And on this night of truth, many of us come here struggling to comprehend the many events of the past year and the state of our society. We are shocked at what has become the new normal. We fear that our nation is, as a friend of mine said, spiraling, devolving, perhaps. When we get together, we ask one another, what's going on? Can you believe this? Who can we trust? Now, a rabbi has a unique role because whatever I may personally feel about the events of the world, we must consider on a near weekly basis what to comment on and what to let pass by. We've contemplated what issues are worthy of a Shabbat sermon or which might demand a rare public statement to our entire congregation. Most importantly, we've deliberated over when to encourage our congregation to take action. And tonight, especially, I pray that we have gotten it right more often than we have gotten it wrong. I want all of you to know that we hew to the principle that we cannot respond willy-nilly, shifting our focus with the latest headline. Rather, I want us always to respond, to speak, to act based on eternal values that we and our people have long held dear. Our truth is constant. It does not depend on who is in office. That's why, in my eyes, the most disturbing and most harmful pattern of the past year has been the death of truth. There's a story told by our sages. Rabbi Shimon said, when the Holy One of Blessing decided to create human beings, the angels formed themselves into factions. Some of them were in favor of God's decision, while others urged God to reconsider. According to the Psalms, the angels of righteousness and peace fought with one another. The angel of righteousness said, God, let human beings be created because they will perform righteous deeds. While the angel of peace said, no, God, let them not be created. They will only create war and strife. So too, the angels of love and truth fought with one another. The angel of love said, let human beings be created, God, because they will perform acts of love and kindness. While the angel of truth said, let them not be created, because they will be full of falsehood. And in that instant, the Holy One took hold of the angel of truth and cast it to the ground, out of heaven. Our sages have debated the meaning of this parable. Tonight, I'll suggest that God was willing to listen to lots of arguments for and against creating human beings. Even the argument that creating human beings would lead to war and violence. But God was simply unwilling to hear that human beings would not be truthful. God simply couldn't tolerate that. Yet, on this Kol Nidrei, it seems to me that truth has often been cast to the ground. Truth has been evaded, obscured, trampled, and I fear that we now live in a society that has precious little regard for truth. That's scary. And we wonder, what can we possibly do about this? Tonight, let us speak about truth, plainly and clearly. Let's speak about the role of truth first in the public sphere, and then a little bit later in the private sphere. These days, it seems it is difficult to know what is true in the public sphere. Journalism used to be respected as the arbiter of facts and the watchdog of democracy, and it has now become eclipsed by fake news and alternative facts. Social media has enabled each person to broadcast his or her own opinion. However, as Rabbi Jonathan Blake has said, unfounded opinion is not an acceptable substitute for observable fact. We've seen so many things. We've seen climate change deniers routinely given an equal platform with scientists. We're no longer certain whether an article we read is a recommendation from a trusted friend or a plant by a phony Russian bot. We found that major corporations knowingly deceived consumers and lied quite baldly and with seemingly minuscule consequences. And we've seen heads of state hurl unfounded boasts and insults across the Pacific Ocean, at once seeming to play some sort of a game, but simultaneously threatening nuclear war. Hannah Arendt, herself a refuge from the Nazis, said, "The chances of factual truths surviving the onslaught of power are very slim indeed." Sure, we'd like to blame those in Washington or in corporate headquarters or in the media, but that doesn't accomplish anything. It's all too easy to blame others for this disturbing trend. What will we do this year to resuscitate truth? Another story. Once upon a time, about 400 years ago, the Jews of Prague were in difficult straits. According to legend, the community was being attacked under the provocation of the Holy Roman Emperor. So the chief rabbi of Prague, Rabbi Judah Loew, devised a plan. He took clay from the banks of the river to fashion a golem, a superhero monster of sorts, a Jewish Frankenstein. And as a finishing touch, Rabbi Loew inscribed the Hebrew word emet, truth, on the golem's forehead. Instantly, the golem sprang to life, and it patrolled the neighborhood, protecting the residents of the Jewish ghetto from all who would do them harm. Yes, the golem was animated by emet, truth. Truth is what saved the community. In the public sphere, truth exposes evil and defends the innocent. But in a society in which truth has no value, in which leaders cannot be relied upon to speak objectively, in which our sources of information do not verify facts, any action at all can be justified. History has shown that any society in which truth has been warped, devalued, or invalidated is a society in which Jews have ended up being the victims. It happened in Iran and in the Soviet Union and, of course, in Nazi Germany. Now, let me be clear. I'm not comparing the United States to Nazi Germany. To do so would be to make a mockery of Holocaust victims and survivors. But today in the public sphere, we must insist on objective truth. For as George Orwell is reputed to have said, during times of universal deceit, telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act. If you are as troubled as I am by the decline of truth, then we all need to speak out in public, loudly, confidently, repeatedly. And there are specific truths that we need to give voice to. We need to say that climate change caused by human action is real. Moreover, governments, corporations, and individuals are each responsible for mitigating its effects. Abraham Lincoln wrote, "If slavery is not wrong, nothing is wrong." So today we must paraphrase him and say, if racism, bigotry, and xenophobia are not wrong, nothing is wrong. We must say plainly that anti-Semitism is unfortunately once again a present danger. And we must also state that linking all progressive causes together with anti-Zionism in what is called intersectionality is entirely invalid and untrue. We need to say that any war with North Korea is guaranteed to result in hundreds of thousands of civilian deaths across several nations. We need to say that children who were brought here to to this country by their parents and who know no other home deserve a path to citizenship. We need to say over and over again that everyone should have access to quality, affordable health care. It is incumbent upon us to speak these truths and more, because in a society without truth, morality becomes subjective, and that too is a state that we cannot tolerate. Each year I take up this topic with our confirmation class, because they've been raised in a world of pluralism, and that's good. Fashion, interests, family structures, sexuality, gender identity. There is no single definition of what is acceptable and good. Mores value from group to group or place to place. However, such cultural relativism must have its limits. If there's only your opinion and my opinion, who's to say that one is better or more correct? And taken to a logical conclusion, one might eventually say, I personally don't prefer to kill other people because of their religion or their ethnic background, but if you want to do that, who am I to stop you? That would be absurd. In the end, moral relativism just ends up justifying terror and murder and genocide. But we insist on truth, on objective morality. There is no world in which Nazism is good. There is no world in which racism is acceptable. There is no world in which terror is okay. Yes, we are obligated by our values and our history to insist on truth in the public sphere. Judaism asks us to focus on what is eternally true, not ephemeral. So let us not spend our time distracted by tweets. Let us not countenance a society in which truth is devalued and invalidated and cast to the ground. Let us instead recreate a society defined by truth. Truths that are insisted upon and spoken out loud in public. Just a couple of nights ago, Temple Israel hosted a candidates forum for those running for first selectman here in Westport. It was co-sponsored by local churches. We did this because we felt that our congregation needed to be a forum for truth in the public sphere. And here's what I recommend for all of us. When you talk with friends, don't just lament the latest outrage. Articulate what you know to be true. When you're at the dinner table with your family, don't let yourself be distracted by the sound bites of that day. Engage in conversation about facts and principles. And then choose the truths that are most important to you. Find your place to speak them proudly and with conviction, and commit to upholding them in the public arena. Now, at the same time, Judaism has always viewed the public sphere and the private sphere as separate and different from one another. While we insist on the centrality of truth in the public sphere, it's important to recognize, especially tonight, that the private sphere, and by that I mean our home, our marriage, our relationships, our family, that's the private sphere. In that domain, truth is another question altogether. Because in Jewish tradition, truth occupies a place of surprising ambiguity in the private sphere. What ambiguity, you should be saying? What about the 9th commandment? It's right above my head. Doesn't it say, don't lie? The 9th commandment. Specifically, it says, Lo ta'aneh v're'echa eid shaker. Do not give false testimony. In other words, don't lie under oath. The 9th commandment is entirely focused on public court proceedings. Technically, it says nothing about interpersonal relationships. Of course, I'm not advocating lying, especially not on this night of truth. Nonetheless, in Jewish tradition asserts that there are times when other positive values take precedence over truth in the private sphere. Let me give you an example. In one of my favorite Talmudic passages, the sages are debating an important question. They're debating what is the appropriate way to greet a bride at her wedding. They consider various phrases one might use, all of them lovely, and finally they settle on an answer. They agree that one should say, "What a beautiful and graceful bride." It's nice, right? Well, as all Talmudic arguments do, they next turn the question around on themselves, and they ask, but what if she's not so beautiful and not all that graceful? Well, in that case, the sages say, and they all agree on this, they say that you should greet a bride in the following manner: "What a beautiful and graceful bride." What's going on in that story? Our sages insist that on her wedding day, every bride deserves to feel like she is the most beautiful and graceful person on earth. In essence, the sages are telling us that between individuals, there are sometimes principles more important than truth. Of course, honesty is an essential aspect of the bond between spouses. And we all know that close friends are those with whom you can speak truthfully without concern for consequences. Yet if we were to only speak truth, no marriage could stand, and no friendship could endure. We often erroneously insist on making truth our highest priority, and as a result, our homes and our relationships suffer. Tension builds when facts take precedence over the feelings of those we love. Discord arises when I am sure that I am the only one who is right. Truth, unchecked, can be destructive. So think for a moment about your relationship with your spouse or partner, your children, your siblings, your parents. Decency and honor are more important than hard facts. Empathy and compassion take precedence over being correct. Pride and love are valued over accuracy. And peace is more important than precision. I have learned that very often the choice comes down to this: you can be right or you can be loved. Which one do you want to be? Some of us are thinking, I'm not sure. Let's be honest about our truthfulness. Was there a time this year when your need to be right overwhelmed your desire to be loved? Was there a time this year when you shared the truth as you saw it with a loved one or friend and ended up hurting him or her? Was there a time when you could have shown compassion or empathy or honor instead? Would you like to go back and do it over? Yes, we all want to have happier marriages and closer friendships and better relationships with our siblings, our parents, our children, our partners. So let's try this. The next time we have an opportunity to tell someone how right we are and how wrong they are, let's honor them with compassion and decency, patience and love instead. Now, after the golem, that Jewish Frankenstein that I mentioned, After it saved the day, it began to run amok. It threatened destruction within its own Jewish community. It endangered innocent lives. So Rabbi Lowe carefully approached the golem, and he erased the first letter of the word for truth on the golem's forehead. The rabbi knew that if you take away the aleph from emet, you are left with the word met, which means death. Thus the golem died. In Jewish mystical tradition, the aleph represents God. And so if we remove God from truth, what are we left with? Death. Tonight we need both God and truth. Yes, on this Kol Nidrei evening, your rabbi is asking you to pursue two somewhat divergent paths. In public, let us articulate the truth clearly and confidently and repeatedly. We must maintain truth in public discourse. Otherwise, there will be no objective standard of morality. So spend time in conversation about what you know to be true. It is of the utmost importance. Meanwhile, in private, let us recognize that there may be times when honor and compassion are called for above truth. Let us sometimes, at least, choose to be loved rather than being right. Let's help our marriages thrive, our friendships flourish, and our homes achieve peace. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May it be so.